Brothers and sisters, let's talk straight, because what just happened in South Africa demands your absolute attention. While the world continues its tired lectures about Africa's energy insecurity and crumbling infrastructure, something historic quietly unfolded on the southern tip of our continent. On November 6, 2025, South Africa's Koeberg nuclear power station secured a 20-year license extension for Unit 2, guaranteeing operation until November 9, 2045. No global fanfare, no Western applause, just Africans proving they can operate some of the most complex infrastructure on Earth with precision and long-term discipline. This isn't just a South African story. This is a continental message, a rewriting of the narrative, a reminder that Africa isn't waiting for permission to run advanced technology. Africa is already doing it, and has been for over 40 years. Let me begin with absolute honesty. If you'd asked global analysts 20 years ago whether an African nation could safely operate a nuclear power plant for decades, most would have dismissed the idea outright. They would have cited the usual condescending phrases: unstable grids, weak institutions, insufficient technical expertise, the entire catalogue of stereotypes used to downplay African capability. Yet while those same analysts sat in their air-conditioned offices writing pessimistic reports, Africa quietly achieved something that forces them to rewrite their assumptions from scratch. Koeberg Nuclear Power Station, located 30 kilometers north of Cape Town near Melkbosstrand, has stood since the early 1980s. Unit 1 was synchronized to the grid on April 4, 1984, and Unit 2 followed on July 25, 1985. Now, Unit 2 has officially secured its license extension through rigorous evaluation, proving it meets every single safety, structural, and regulatory standard expected of a world-class nuclear installation. Let me be crystal clear about what this means. Nuclear regulators do not compromise. They do not issue partial approvals. They do not say close enough. Either the plant meets the long-term operational criteria or it doesn't. Koeberg met them through comprehensive application that included detailed safety assessments, technical reviews, and infrastructure upgrades as part of the station's long-term operation program. This was no shallow review. The National Nuclear Regulator conducted evaluations examining everything from safety standards to infrastructure readiness. The process examined seismic safety, reactor pressure vessel integrity, emergency protocols, steam generator performance, radiation containment, cooling systems, personnel training levels, and compliance with international nuclear operation standards. The process is so strict that even some European facilities struggle to pass on the first attempt, yet Koeberg succeeded, fully, completely, confidently. Here's where the story becomes even more powerful. This extension for Unit 2 follows Unit 1 receiving its own license renewal on July 15, 2024, extending its operation until July 21, 2044. So South Africa didn't just renew one reactor, they secured both units, planting a flag in the future and declaring Africa will have nuclear stability for the next 2 decades. Together, both units are now part of a global cohort of more than 120 nuclear reactors that have safely extended their service beyond the original 40-year design life. This alone shatters decades of global stereotypes. For years, Africa was told nuclear energy was too advanced, too sensitive, too technical for the continent. Meanwhile, Koeberg was quietly doing what many developed countries still haven't mastered, maintaining nuclear reactors safely since the 1980s, operating through political transitions, economic turbulence, leadership changes, and shifting global energy landscapes. Think about this timeline. South Africa built this plant in the 1980s and ran it through apartheid's final years, through democratic transition, through economic challenges, through everything. And the plant never lost its status as one of the continent's most reliable energy assets. That level of stability doesn't happen by accident. It happens through discipline, technical expertise, and the dedication of thousands of African professionals who spent their careers perfecting a system many outsiders assumed would fail. So why does securing these 20 extra years of nuclear operation matter so profoundly for Africa's energy future? This extension locks in 1,860 megawatts of clean, reliable, round-the-clock electricity for South Africa, rated at this capacity with average annual production of 13,668 gigawatt hours. If you want to understand the true power of this moment, you must understand what nuclear energy actually represents. It's not just another energy source, it's the backbone of a stable modern grid. And that's exactly what Africa needs: stability, predictability, and long-term reliability. What happens when the sun sets on solar plants? What happens when wind slows over turbines? What happens when drought lowers water levels at hydro dams? Africa knows the answer all too well. Power cuts, factory shutdowns, economic losses, public frustration, and the painful cycle of load shedding that reshapes daily life in ways the rest of the world can barely imagine. Nuclear, however, doesn't care about weather, time, or climate. It works when everything else pauses. It delivers constant baseload power, the type of electricity that keeps steel plants running at 2 a.m., keeps hospitals fully operational during storms, keeps data centers stable even when national demand spikes, and keeps a country from sliding into the chaos of unpredictable blackouts. Unit 2 demonstrated exceptional reliability by operating at 100% energy availability factor for 241 consecutive days in 2025. That's not peak power or intermittent supply. That's steady, unbroken output. Whether the grid is stressed or calm, whether winter demand surges or summer heat spikes, Koeberg keeps delivering. That reliability is almost impossible to replace. If Koeberg disappeared tomorrow, South Africa would instantly lose a massive chunk of its stable baseload, throwing the country into an energy crisis that would take years and billions to recover from. Instead of scrambling to build temporary fixes, the extension supports South Africa's Integrated Resource Plan 2025, which recognizes nuclear energy's role in delivering low-carbon, cost-effective, and dependable baseload power. The country now has what every energy transition desperately needs: time. 20 years to build renewable infrastructure properly. Time to expand transmission lines. Time to scale up storage solutions. Time to diversify the energy mix without risking national collapse. This also gives investors confidence. You cannot grow a manufacturing sector, a mining sector, or a digital economy if you're worried about daily electricity instability. With Koeberg secured until 2045, South Africa can attract industries that depend on consistent power: electric vehicle factories, smelters, hydrogen production plants, tech hubs, and more. So what exactly allowed Koeberg to run safely, sustainably, and professionally for 4 straight decades when global experts doubted it? The secret isn't the reactor. The secret is the people. Koeberg's chief nuclear officer Velafi Antuli emphasized that the extension results from the hard work, focus, and dedication of our highly skilled and competent employees. Every control panel, every maintenance cycle, every safety drill, every emergency protocol, every inspection, these were run by Africans, engineers trained to global nuclear standards, technicians who understand the heartbeat of a reactor, safety teams that treat every shift like a mission, regulators who refuse to compromise on a single requirement. Do you realize how significant that is? This is not a foreign-dominated plant. This is not a charity project. This is not some outsourced miracle supervised by Western experts. Koeberg is living proof that Africans mastered nuclear engineering, with the rigorous safety assessments demonstrating the depth and pipeline of nuclear engineering talent available in South Africa. Think about the discipline required. Nuclear plants operate under some of the strictest rules on Earth. You can't skip steps, you can't improvise, you can't say we'll fix it next week. A nuclear reactor forces everyone around it to become precise, structured, calm, and accountable. And that's exactly what Koeberg's workforce became, decade after decade. Koeberg has earned NOSCAR safety status from the National Occupational Safety Association more than 14 times, reflecting its world-class safety culture more than 14 times. Let that sink in. This isn't a one-time achievement or beginner's luck. This is sustained excellence over decades. Something extraordinary happened along the way. South Africa built one of the strongest technical talent pipelines on the continent. Many of Africa's top nuclear engineers either trained at Koeberg or learned from people who did. When Egypt began building El Daba, when Nigeria explored small modular reactors, when Kenya formed its nuclear authority, they all referenced Koeberg, not as a warning, but as a model. You see the irony? The world thought Africa would learn nuclear technology from the West. Instead, Africa is learning it from Africa. What message does Koeberg's success send to other African countries now exploring nuclear power? Here's the truth. Global powers are silently wrestling with. Koeberg's success destroys one of the longest-running myths about Africa, that the continent can't handle highly advanced, high-risk, high-precision technology without foreign supervision. For decades, Western commentators repeated that narrative with confidence, as if it were universal law. They claimed Africa wasn't ready for nuclear power. They said Africans lacked the discipline, the regulatory frameworks, the engineering culture. They insisted any nuclear attempt would lead to disaster, corruption, or mismanagement. But then reality stepped in, and reality looked nothing like their predictions. Africa built a nuclear plant, ran it safely for over 40 years, and just earned regulatory approval that many richer countries still struggle to get. Koeberg didn't wobble. It didn't make headlines for meltdowns or scandals. It simply worked, quietly, consistently, professionally, keeping South Africa's grid alive through some of the hardest periods in the country's history. Meanwhile, the nuclear renaissance is spreading across Africa. Egypt is now leading Africa with the El Daba nuclear power plant under construction, 4 Russian-built VVER 1200 reactors, totaling 4.8 gigawatts. The first unit is set to start operations in the second half of 2028, with the remaining 3 units slated for completion in 2029. This will make Egypt a continental powerhouse in nuclear energy generation. Kenya's Nuclear Power and Energy Agency said the country is on track to start construction on its first nuclear power plant by 2027, with the facility beginning to generate power by 2034. 22 African countries have expressed interest in nuclear power and are at various stages of considering or embarking on their first nuclear programs. Why? Because Koeberg proved something that can't be debated anymore. Africa isn't too risky for nuclear power. Africa is ready. Koeberg gave every African nation a template, not an abstract dream, but living evidence. Evidence that complex regulatory compliance is achievable. Evidence that nuclear culture can flourish on African soil. Evidence that Africans can run, maintain, and secure high-precision infrastructure better than the world expects. And you know what that does? It breaks psychological barriers. For decades, African nations were conditioned to believe they should aim small, keep it simple, stay realistic. Koeberg shatters that mindset. It tells African policymakers, aim bigger, go further, don't limit yourselves. Every country talking about energy transition loves to show off solar fields, wind farms, and green hydrogen roadmaps. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. None of those dreams survive without stable baseload power underneath them. You cannot build a modern, resilient, low-carbon future if your grid collapses the moment weather changes. And this is exactly where Koeberg becomes the quiet hero of South Africa's entire energy blueprint. The extension supports South Africa's Integrated Resource Plan 2025, which recognizes nuclear energy's role in delivering low-carbon, cost-effective, and dependable baseload power. The plan envisions massive renewable growth, battery storage expansion, cleaner gas infrastructure, and regional hydro integration. But all of that depends on having one unshakable anchor, an electricity source that doesn't care about rain, wind, sunlight, droughts, or fuel price spikes. Nuclear power is that anchor, and Koeberg is the only nuclear anchor Africa has right now, though not for long. Imagine the integrated resource plan without Koeberg. South Africa would have faced a devastating hole, nearly 2,000 megawatts disappearing from the grid at the worst possible time. To replace that with renewables alone would require enormous land, billions in investment, dozens of new transmission lines, and storage capacity that doesn't yet exist at scale. To replace it with gas would drive up costs and create new dependencies on imported fuel. To replace it with coal would be politically toxic, environmentally unacceptable, and economically backward. The 20-year extension gives South Africa breathing room, precious, irreplaceable time to build new infrastructure properly instead of rushing into panic decisions. Think about the industries this stabilizes: automotive manufacturing, mining, smelting, cement, digital infrastructure, logistics hubs, port operations, water treatment plants. Every single one needs reliable power or they collapse. Investors will not build billion-dollar factories in a country where electricity goes off unpredictably. With 2 more decades of secure baseload power, South Africa can finally push forward on big ambitions. Electric vehicle production, green hydrogen exports, African battery manufacturing, deep tech clusters, and massive renewable corridors. Without Koeberg, these dreams would be impossible. With Koeberg, they become achievable. Koeberg is no longer just a power station. It's Africa's announcement to the world that the continent will define its own energy destiny. For decades, Africa's story was written by others. Multilateral lenders prescribed appropriate solutions, and most kept Africa dependent. Endless diesel imports, donor-funded solar panels, emergency interventions, temporary fixes that looked good in reports but failed on the ground. But then comes Koeberg, standing on the Cape Coast like a quiet rebellion. A reminder that Africa doesn't need to be told what it can or cannot handle. A reminder that African engineers, not foreign contractors, kept this reactor stable through storms, political transitions, economic turbulence, and global energy crises. Now, with its license extended to 2045, Koeberg becomes a symbol, an inspiration for the entire continent. Egypt's El Daba will generate 4,800 megawatts, more than double Koeberg's output. Nigeria is exploring small modular reactors, with Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission CEO Yusuf Aminu Ahmed stating that escalating small modular reactors could solve the energy gap and then continue planning bigger reactors in the long term. Countries like Ghana, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and Zambia are laying legal and scientific foundations for nuclear adoption. These nations are looking at Koeberg and saying, if South Africa could build this culture of safety, so can we. And they're right. Africa's future energy landscape will not be defined by scarcity. It will be defined by ambition. Nuclear energy gives Africa something no other energy source can promise at this moment: decades of stable, clean, predictable power on which entire economies can be built. Imagine the Africa of 2040. An Africa where renewable energy thrives because nuclear provides the stability beneath it. An Africa where countries export green minerals not as raw ore, but as finished products because electricity is abundant. An Africa where manufacturing hubs rival Asia because the continent no longer suffers from chronic power instability. An Africa where data centers, robotics facilities, electric vehicle industries, and biotech labs operate at global standards because the grid no longer collapses. Koeberg is the first domino in that chain. Its success sends a shockwave across the continent, a psychological shift, a new confidence. It tells African leaders, you don't have to accept limited options. You can leap directly into high-tech, high-precision energy systems that even wealthy nations struggle to manage. And here's the part the world didn't expect. Africa is not afraid of that future. Africa is running toward it. Brothers and sisters, what we're witnessing here is more than nuclear engineering. It's about African excellence proving itself on the global stage. It's about breaking chains of doubt that were never ours to carry in the first place. When one African nation successfully operates nuclear technology for 4 decades and earns international validation for 2 more, it changes everything. It changes how we see ourselves. It changes how the world must see us. And most importantly, it changes what becomes possible for the 22 African nations now pursuing their own nuclear programs. The question is no longer whether Africa can handle advanced technology. Koeberg answered that decades ago. The question now is, how fast can we scale this success across the continent? If one African country can master nuclear power, What happens when 10 do? What happens when 20 do? That's the question the world isn't ready for, and the future Africa is preparing to answer. This is just the beginning. From Cape Town to Cairo, from Kilifi to Conakry, Africa is building the infrastructure for a new era. An era where we don't ask permission, an era where we don't accept limitations, an era where African engineers, African regulators, African workers prove that excellence has no borders, and certainly no color. Koeberg showed us the way. Now it's time for the rest of the continent to follow. What do you think? Should more African countries follow South Africa's path and build their own nuclear power plants? Which African nation do you believe will be next to bring a nuclear plant fully online? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring, hit that like button and share this video with every Pan-African who needs to hear this message. Subscribe and ring the notification bell. We're bringing you the African excellence stories that mainstream media won't tell. Until next time, remember, Africa isn't rising. Africa is already here. We're just making sure the world finally sees it.